Welcome to the Parallel World Library, where we explore strange and fascinating stories in other dimensions. Now, let's relax your body and take your mind to another world. Number 13, Mink Streeter by TunaV. Chapter 10. He Wants to Kill Me? 1. Mr. Hoffen was lying on the ground with Sylvan standing before him. At this moment, if Sylvan wished, he could send Mr. Hoffen on his way a bit earlier, because Mr. Hoffen's earlier behavior and words had put immense pressure on him. Having returned to life in this world, he severely lacked a sense of security. For now, he was still relying on this identity to live. Once he lost this skin, his life would slide into who knows what. Moreover, this wasn't just about life in the ordinary sense. There were clearly other factors beyond Sylvan's understanding. If it were just running away from home, Sylvan wouldn't feel such great pressure. He feared it wasn't just about being expelled from home. It couldn't be that simple. Sylvan sensed a crisis akin to that faced by witches in the Middle Ages. Stepping forward and bending down, Sylvan reached out his hand. Just a bit of force to strangle or hold Mr. Hoffen's head, pretending to wake him, then smashing it against the tile floor once more, dealing another round of damage. This way, the suddenly appeared whirlpool of danger could vanish invisibly before swallowing him. But could he do it? Having such thoughts wasn't strange. Even the most gentle people in life would occasionally have moments of sudden loss of control and evil thoughts sprouting. But in the end, Sylvan stood still, not moving. He waited until Mina called from the second floor. Aunt Mary came up from the basement, and Paul ran over to prepare to hold Mr. Hoffen. Only then did Sylvan regain his senses amidst Aunt Mary's screams, stepping forward to help lift Mr. Hoffen into the Inmarace family hearse. Paul started the car while Sylvan stayed there and accompanied Mr. Hoffen. This modified car was originally more prolonged than a regular car. The passenger seat had long been removed, leaving ample space to place a coffin. Mr. Hoffen lay there motionless. He was quite lucky. Ambulances weren't common in this era, and now he immediately had a vehicle that could take him to the nearest hospital. Even luckier, if he couldn't be saved, he also had a car to lie in on the way back, which was very convenient. Moreover, out of respect for his relationship with grandfather, there might even be a discount on the funeral services. The one who'd suffer would be Aunt Mary.
Haha.
Sylvan suddenly laughed out loud, raising his hand to rub his face gently. At this moment, the golden-haired dog that had followed its owner into the car moved to Mr. Hoffen's side, licking his fingers. After nuzzling its owner for a while, it slowly came to Sylvan. Sylvan reached out his hand and the dog didn't shy away, allowing Sylvan to pet its head. Seeming to enjoy the petting, it decisively lay down on Sylvan's lap. When Sylvan stopped petting it, it even used its nose to touch Sylvan's hand, indicating to continue.
Sigh.
Sylvan looked at Mr. Hoffen lying there, unable to help but sigh. He leaned back against the car wall, hand stroking the dog's head.
Whatever.
The car drove straight into the hospital and Mr. Hoffen was taken to the emergency room. Paul was busy with the paperwork. Sylvan led the golden-haired dog to a bench next to a flower bed. After sitting for about half an hour, Paul came running with a smile.
Young Master Sylvan, the doctor said that although Mr. Hoffen is still in a coma, he's considered out of danger.
Sylvan breathed a sigh of relief, feeling somewhat comfortable in his heart, yet also somewhat lost. This old man's life was callous, such a large pool of blood, yet he still hung on.
The bills will all be sent to the house,
Paul added. The Inmarace family, being in the funeral business, naturally had good relations with the nearby hospital. How good! Aunt Winnie could even get hold of the list of seriously ill patients in nearby hospitals. Sometimes, even when someone was still being rescued, Uncle Mason would already be there smoking and waiting in the parking lot outside. As long as there are benefits, there will certainly be relationships. With this layer of relationships, some paperwork naturally gets processed very quickly.
Does he need a caretaker?
Sylvan asked.
You can request a nurse.
Then please do so.
Yes, young master. I'll go arrange it.
By the way, Paul, do you have any cigarettes?
I do. Young master, you want some?
Paul took half a pack of cigarettes from his pocket and handed Sylvan a lighter.
Thanks.
You're welcome. I'll go invite the nurse first.
All right.
Sylvan pulled out a cigarette and put it in his mouth. In this era, smoking bans weren't strict. Even in the hospital courtyard, Sylvan saw quite a few people with cigarettes in their mouths, and passing nurses wouldn't shout at them. He lit one and took a drag. His brain once again warned of the invasion of toxins. His body also showed some resistance reactions, nausea immediately hitting. But Sylvan ignored it. He felt he was as stupid as smoking. A smoker is someone who resists the discomfort of their body, forcefully learning a habit that constantly harms their own body. And he had sent Mr. Hoffen to the hospital out of danger, sitting and watching himself slide step by step into an unclear abyss. He was examining himself, but not too intensely. He also regretted, but equally not very intensely. He felt he was foolish, and this feeling was very intense.
Phew.
With a burning cigarette, Sylvan leaned back and rested on the bench. And just at this moment, a figure suddenly appeared before him. Sylvan was startled, noticing the cigarette pinched between his fingers being taken away.
You... grandfather?
Dis appeared before Sylvan. Dis was still wearing the same clothes as when he left, but Sylvan noticed that his trouser legs had obvious stains, and the hand holding his cigarette seemed to have black marks. Was that mud? Dis threw the cigarette to the ground and asked,
"Since when did you learn this?"
Sylvan hesitated for a moment. Actually, just now, he had the impulse to tell grandfather the truth, because instinctively, from today's dream, coupled with Mr. Hoffen's questioning, he had realized something unusual. It should be known that Grandfather Dis and Mr. Hoffen were old friends. It wasn't about worrying that Mr. Hoffen would tell Grandfather something after waking up, but rather, when comparing a retired philosophy professor who just liked fortune-telling or mysticism with Grandfather, a priest running a funeral home, it seemed Grandfather might be the most mysterious one. If Mr. Hoffen could know Grandfather, wouldn't he have discovered it? So would resistance be futile and honesty receive leniency? But looking at Grandfather's face, Sylvan's heartfelt words, after going around his throat once, were still swallowed back. He said,
Uncle Mason taught me.
Hearing this, Dis frowned.
Mr. Hoffen is in there. The doctor said he's out of danger.
Sylvan reported. Dis nodded, asking,
Mary has told me about it. Were you scared?
No. Well, a little frightened.
Sylvan's answer was a bit jumbled, but Sylvan felt it wasn't due to himself.
I'll see him briefly, and you wait here.
Yes, Grandfather.
Chapter 11. He Wants to Kill Me. 2. Dis entered the hospital. After a while, Dis and Paul walked back. Sylvan also stood up, following them to the parking lot.
When did you learn to drive?
Dis asked Paul.
Not long ago, observe enough, and I learned.
Paul replied somewhat shyly.
Got your license?
Yes, sir.
Paul answered immediately.
Starting next month, your monthly salary will increase by 1,000 LU.
Thank you, Mr. Dis.
Paul and Ron had very contrasting personalities. Ron liked drinking and gambling. After finishing his work in the basement today, he immediately clocked out, probably rolling around in some bar by now. Paul, on the other hand, stayed behind to clean the car.
Let's go back.
Dis glanced at Sylvan and repeated,
Home.
Paul was still driving, with Sylvan and Dis sitting in the back. Because there were no seats, the two sat face to face on the car floor.
Should we notify Mr. Hoffen's family, sir?
No need. His children severed ties with him long ago and aren't in Luogia City. In a few days, remember to visit and monitor his condition.
All right, sir.
After a brief exchange, Sylvan saw Dis reach out and roll up his sleeve. What terrified Sylvan was that a third of his grandfather's left arm was burnt black, as if it had rolled through a coal fire.
Pliers,
Dis said.
Ah.
Sylvan was stunned for a moment, then quickly realized, moving forward to open the black suitcase beside his grandfather. Inside was a set of small surgical tools, along with some items clearly not meant for ordinary use. For example, several bottles of eerily colored liquids, transparent pearls, oddly shaped card decks, a whip made of unknown material. Most notable was an intricately carved sword hilt. On the left was a twisted skull, and on the right was a benevolent saint. Although this hilt had no blade, when searching for items, Sylvan still carefully avoided it, as if there really might be an invisible blade ready to cut his finger. Sylvan handed the pliers to his grandfather. Grandfather's right hand took the pliers, gripping a corner of his pitch-black skin, slowly tearing it open. Although the car was running, Sylvan could still clearly hear a sound like paper being torn. The golden-haired dog that had followed them was also nearby, wide-eyed, curled up in a corner, trembling. Grandfather, indifferent to his surroundings, used the pliers to tear off 2 pieces of burnt black skin, then said,
Tweezers.
Ah, yes.
Sylvan passed the tweezers, but Grandfather didn't take them. Instead, he placed his left hand in front of Sylvan and handed over the pliers with his right hand. In Sylvan's memory, such an image had never appeared. However, after pressing his lips together, Sylvan still took the pliers in his right hand and the tweezers in his left. First, he used the tweezers to pull the burnt skin away from the flesh, then used the pliers to peel off the entire piece. Beneath the burnt black skin was soft, bright red flesh, faintly oozing blood. Throughout the process, Dis never cried out in pain. His expression didn't even twitch. When all the black skin patches had been cleared away, Dis's left arm looked as if it had just been boiled.
Done.
Sylvan said. Dis reached out, took a bottle of purple liquid, opened the cap with his fingertip, and poured all the contents over his left arm.
Ah.
Sylvan inhaled sharply, because he saw Dis's left arm begin to emit white smoke, accompanied by a sizzling sound like oil in a hot pan. A long while later, Dis sighed in relief and lowered his sleeve. Sylvan asked with concern,
No need for bandages?
Dis shook his head. Sylvan said nothing more, continuing to sit straight. By now the car had stopped. They had arrived home. Sylvan led Mr. Hoffen's golden retriever out of the car while Paul parked inside the yard.
Mr. Dis, young Master Sylvan, I'll head back first. I'll come early tomorrow to arrange the funeral.
All right.
Dis nodded. Paul, who had just received a raise, happily skipped back to his own home. Sylvan still lingered at the house entrance, not rushing to go in because Dis hadn't entered yet. The two just stood there at the yard entrance. On the 3rd-floor windowsill of the villa, Pal stood up, its cat eyes staring intently at this spot. Somehow it felt like the background music of a stage play had suddenly changed style. It was that abrupt, yet that clear. Sylvan felt his lips begin to tremble and his breathing became labored. The golden retriever being led by Sylvan looked up at him quizzically because it noticed its leash was shaking, because the person holding it, his hand, was trembling. Humans have a 6th sense. It could be the wind telling you, it could be the sunlight informing you, or it could even be the flowers and grass whispering to you. Sylvan didn't know if a dead person's 6th sense could be enhanced after being reborn. In fact, right now he had no mind to think about whether these things existed or not. He felt like he was an egg just taken from a chicken coop, being tossed back and forth playfully by a naughty child. Run? Sylvan tried his best to turn his neck, looking to the side where there was a road, where he could stretch his legs and run to the end. Then Sylvan began to turn his neck in the other direction, but halfway through, he involuntarily lowered his head. He saw his trouser legs and his grandfather's left arm. He even saw in his grandfather's left hand the sword hilt that he had left in the black suitcase now lying in his hand. At that moment, Sylvan felt his eyes begin to well up with tears, his nose start to sting as if mucus would fall, and his facial muscles slightly contract. Before his eyes, it no longer seemed to be the Inmarace family villa at number 13 Mink Street, but a fortified city wall surrounding him. He stood in the middle of a high platform. Beside him, a gallows prepared for him.
Sylvan.
Dis's voice thundered in his ears.
Grandfather.
Sylvan's teeth were chattering, but his inner heart was extremely calm. he felt his spirit and body torn apart.
Sylvan, where is this place?
Sylvan opened his mouth. From the corner of his eye, Sylvan noticed his grandfather's left arm had raised, circling behind him. At this hair-trigger moment, Sylvan straightened his back using a hoarse and low voice, almost shouting,
Home.
This is the end of today's story. Has Dis discovered Sylvan's true identity? Will this be the end of Sylvan's peaceful life in the Imarice family? Please like and subscribe to follow the subsequent developments. Thank you.